Okay, so I'm in Hanoi, in the north of Vietnam. It's late. A friend and I are ambling around Hoan Kim Lake. The street vendors are packing up shop. The lights from little restaurants and bars are flickering softly on the water. Here and there you can see a couple walking hand in hand. A warm breeze is carrying scents of hoa sura, that thick, milky sweet Vietnamese flower, and something fried and delicious that I can't yet name. And after days of this relentless monsoon rain, the air really feels light, like it's finally exhaled. So we find a bench and we sit down, overlooking the lake, and as people pass us by, we kind of fall into one of those long, meandering conversations. Fears, dreams, desires, the meaning of life. And in that moment, I swear I felt like the main character of an indie film. Like somebody would pan the camera out, cue the soft piano music, and zoom in on us having some profound revelation under a street lamp. But just as this guy that I'm with is about to say something really deep, a street vendor walks by, loudly trying to sell us some of his little trinkets. And I mean, he is not giving up. No matter how many times we say, no, thank you, he just keeps flicking these neon lighters in our faces with this hopeful, relentless grin. And eventually, he does move on. And we're just laughing about the whole situation. Here we are having this perfectly cinematic moment. And then, real life walks by with a box of glow sticks and kind of gets into the shop. But later that night, we talked about it again. And we wondered, what if the movie followed him home? What if it showed him kissing his wife goodnight, ruffling his daughter's hair, eating dinner with his family? Because yes, we were the main characters in our own little moment. But so was he. Welcome back to Lost and Found, the podcast where we're figuring things out in real time, together. I'm your host, Carmen Vid, and today we're talking about a trend / philosophy / social media phenomenon that's been kind of flickering in and out of my thoughts for a while now. And that is main character energy. So what does it actually mean? Why has it taken over social media? Is it shallow? Is it deep? What would the philosophers have said about it? Today we're going to get into all of that. The good, the bad, the delusional, and the genuinely empowering. But first, I asked some of my friends what makes them feel like the main characters in their own lives. And here's what they had to say.
So for me, the main character energy comes from a deep realization that life is art and you really, really can do with it what you like. Romanticize your life always, because there's always some form of beauty, there's always some lesson to be learned. In every situation or person you encounter, you can make of it how you choose.
The thing that makes me feel like I'm the main character in my own story seems to always come down to why I make a decision. And if I know deep down when I make a decision that I've made it not because of any outside things or judgments of other people, but because of what I want, my own opinions, my own values and beliefs, that always gives me faith that I'm doing things for reasons that I know I can believe in.
If I need to feel like the main character in my life, I will either find the nearest mountain, and luckily I live in an abundance of them, but I will put my headphones on, turn them all the way up, climb to the peak, and then allow myself to feel anything that comes up. And usually, for me, it's joy, but it could be anything that I've compartmentalized, and it's super therapeutic to have a really good cry up there. Or I will find a coffee shop that speaks to me in whatever city I'm currently in. I will order my usual and then seat myself next to a window and then just people watch.
So I live by this mantra where I make friends in the places I want to be a local at. So whether that's finding my new favorite cafe or going to the deli around the corner from where I stay, I always make sure to ask what the name of the server or the barista is. So the next time I see them, I can say hello, call them on their name, ask how it's going, and over time become a bit more of a local. It always makes me feel like the main character.
I do get a bit of a glow up when I speak another language. A lot of the time, my very broken conversational ladaki, or Japanese is like, to a native speaker would be like, oh yeah, good, you know, you're giving it a go, cute. But there's still something about it that makes me step outside of the expectations that other people put me in. Yeah. Because then they're like, oh, suddenly this white boy's speaking ladaki. And then I'm just like, oh yeah, I get off on that a bit. I get off.
Isn't that beautiful? I love my friends. I hope you got some inspiration from that. Okay, now let's backtrack for a second. What actually is main character energy? For me, it's that moment when you catch yourself mid-scene. You're walking down a sunlit street with your headphones in, and it just feels like a movie montage. Main character energy is saying yes to this spontaneous night out or this spontaneous trip just for the plot. It's lighting a candle, pouring a glass of wine, and writing in your journal. It's a feeling, specifically a feeling of being awake in your own life, of saying, I'm not going to wait for something to happen to me. I'm going to live like I'm already in the middle of a story worth telling. And yeah, sure, it's everywhere right now. If you scroll through TikTok or Instagram, you'll find creators talking about their main character era everywhere. They're romanticizing their routines, solo traveling, dressing up to go grocery shopping, all the things. And some people might write it off as cringe, but I think at its core, this trend speaks to something deeper. It speaks to a collective hunger, a craving for meaning, for control and beauty, in a world that often feels chaotic and disconnected and out of our own hands. I mean, millennials and Gen Z grew up in an age where everything is content, where we're always being seen. But ironically, so many of us feel invisible. We feel stuck in jobs that we don't love, timelines we didn't choose, systems we can't really escape. So maybe main character energy is our way of saying, I want more. I want more agency, more joy, more moments that feel like mine. And really, there's something beautiful about that. Because if life isn't a movie, if we don't have a script or a director or a preset plotline, then maybe it's on us to create moments that matter. Because does life imitate art or does art imitate life? At this point, who knows? This reminds me of something that the existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre said. He said, existence precedes essence. We exist before we become. That's what it basically means. So he is saying, you aren't born with some fixed identity. You create it through your choices, your actions, your decisions. So of course we crave main character energy because deep down, we know we're not just here to exist. We want to become. And becoming takes presence, risk. It takes choosing to live your life as if it matters because it does. Right? So here's the thing. There's a reason main character energy is having a moment right now. Not because it's trendy, or not just because it's trendy, but because when it's done right, it actually is really transformative. Because suddenly you're not waiting to be chosen. You're choosing. You're not sitting on the sidelines of your own life, shrinking yourself, making yourself palatable. Now you're stepping into the scene. You're walking taller. You're taking up space. Because if you think of a main character in a movie or in a book, they're not afraid to make the risky decision, right? To make themselves be heard. Because they grow, they're interesting, they have deep, layered thoughts and experiences, enough to hold an audience's attention and build stories around. And for so many of us, especially people who were taught to be agreeable or small and humble, even just saying, I matter out loud can be revolutionary. And that's the power in this idea. It's not just an aesthetic. It's not just the tote bag and the coffee shop and the carefully curated life. No, it's agency. It's deciding I get to design this. I get to do things just because they delight me. I get to make choices that don't make sense on paper, but feel right in my gut. And sometimes that means saying yes to something spontaneous for the plot. Booking the solo trip, calling the person, quitting the job, saying, screw it, I'm moving to Argentina. But often, it's also in the small things, like taking yourself out on a walk and curating a playlist that feels like the soundtrack to your movie. It's wearing the outfit that maybe feels a little bit too much, but it makes you feel like you. It's writing in a journal at a bar, sipping wine like you're the character in a French film, even if nobody's watching, or even if everybody's watching. It's a reminder that you're here and this moment belongs to you. And just to show you how truly life-changing this mindset can be when you take it even further, I want to tell you about this friend. So I have a friend who is in a really bad relationship. And I mean, like, really bad. The guy was cheating on her all the time. And she would find out, and then she would just keep going back because she loved him so much. And she couldn't stand the idea of facing the heartbreak of actually walking away from someone who clearly wasn't good for her. So she stayed. And she endured the awful treatment and the lies and the disappointments. But one day she called me up and she said she was just done. But now, mind you, I've heard this before. She's said this many times, and every time she goes back, right? So I'm like, yeah, great. But I'm being supportive, but I'm questioning whether this is actually going to stick. But this time, it did. And months later, I asked her, what changed? What made you finally cut ties with this guy? After everything he did, after all the pain, what made this goodbye real? And she said something that I will remember for a really long time. She said, I just realized the main character doesn't end up with the cheater. He's just the lesson. And then she moves on to have her own amazing love story. Wow. The main character doesn't end up with the cheater. That is so profound. The mindset shift clicked. She stopped feeling powerless. She stopped waiting to be rescued. She stopped trying to earn the bare minimum from somebody who didn't even care. Because suddenly she understood she was the one who could give herself the love story she wanted by walking away from the one that was never meant for her in the first place. And that's what main character energy can do. It gives you your power back. It doesn't erase the pain, it doesn't make life perfect, but it reminds you that even when the plot gets messy, you get to choose where the story goes next. And when you live like that, even just a little, your days stop blending together. You make small and big decisions that really allow you to take your life into your own hands. You create moments that mean something. You start to feel alive again. And it's not about performing. It's about presence. It's about participating in your own life. So this reminds me of Nietzsche, the philosopher that said we should live our lives as if they are works of art. Not perfectly, not neatly, but intentionally, with passion and color and absurdity. And of course, the moment I say absurdity, I'm thinking of Albert Camus and his book, The Myth of Sisyphus. Oh, let's get into it for a second. Allow me this tangent. So Albert Camus was a French-Algerian philosopher and writer, and he's often associated with existentialism. But he kind of rejected the label and instead carved out his own lane, which has since been called absurdism. So absurdism is based on this central idea that life is inherently meaningless. But before you get depressed, I already know what you're thinking. But he said, as human beings, we are meaning-making creatures. We crave meaning and purpose and order. And that contradiction between our desire for meaning and the randomness of the universe is what Camus called the absurd. Okay, so that's kind of the idea of absurdism. Now, what is this book that I mentioned, The Myth of Sisyphus? So Camus took a story from ancient Greek mythology to explore this idea. So Sisyphus was a king who tried to cheat deaths and trick the gods. And as punishment, he was sentenced to roll this massive boulder up a hill for eternity. And every time he neared the top, the boulder would roll all the way back down again. And this is the ultimate image of pointless, repetitive labor. It's a never-ending struggle without reward or conclusion or meaning. But here's where Camus flips the script. He says, in this book, it's such a famous line, he writes, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy." Okay, wait, what? What does that mean? Why happy? Because for Camus, once Sisyphus accepts the absurdity of his condition, once he stops hoping for the struggle to end or for life to make sense, that's when he becomes free. Sisyphus reclaims power by embracing the absurd, by choosing to keep pushing the boulder, even though it's meaningless, right? Okay, well, what does this have to do with main character energy? Main character energy, at its best, is about intentionally showing up, even when life feels repetitive or absurd or uncertain, even when no one is watching, even when the plot doesn't make sense, right? It's choosing to make your little routines matter. It's choosing to roll the damn boulder and do it with style. So when Camus says, we must imagine Sisyphus happy, what he's really saying is, you don't need life to be perfect or clear or meaningful in order to make it beautiful. You just have to decide to live it that way. So in a way, Sisyphus becomes the main character of his own myth. And I kind of like to think of him, AirPods in, sweaty, smiling, still pushing the boulder up the hill, finding meaning in the mess of it all. Because life is kind of absurd, and maybe main character energy at its best is just our way of saying, if I have to live through this, I may as well make it art. Okay, let's pause for a moment there. If you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like your life is moving but you're not in it, like you're watching from the back row instead of acting on the stage, try this. I want to give you a few ideas of helping cultivate main character energy in your life. Start a conversation with a stranger and give them your full attention. Take yourself out dancing just to feel your body move. Apply for that dream job that you're wildly unqualified for. Walk into a volunteer center and say, hey, how can I help? Host a dinner with some of your closest friends. Light candles, play Nina Simone or Frank Sinatra. Wake up at 5 a.m. and go watch the sunrise. Sometimes all it takes is one wild, brave hour to rewrite the whole scene. Because the main character isn't always loud, but they are the ones who are moving the story forward. Okay. Amazing. Are you feeling fired up? Yes? We're feeling inspired, motivated, like we can take on the world. That's exactly what I want for you. Yes. But let's hold up for a second. So far, we've talked about how beautiful and empowering main character energy can be. But let's be honest, this is not all romantic rooftop dinners and poetic character arcs. There's really a darker side to this too. And if we're not careful, we can tip from presence into performance, from groundedness into ego. Because when the focus becomes being seen rather than seeing, main character energy turns into a mirror, and not a very honest one. Okay, let's talk about it. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in our own plot lines, our growth, our curated story and aesthetics, that we start treating people around us like props. Like maybe they're cameos in our movie or background noise, they're extras. And that can be really dangerous because people are not just extras. They're not here to be your character development arc. Every single person we meet are entire stories unto themselves. And I want to get really real here, especially because I've been solo traveling for the past 2 years, so I see this so much, over and over again. And you can spot it instantly. Tourists, mostly Westerners, would walk through a city like they're on a film set, treating local people like they're part of the scenery. You know, they're snapping photos without asking, getting frustrated when someone doesn't speak perfect English, and they're acting as if somebody that cannot express themselves perfectly in English, in their language, if they can't do that, then they must not have something to say. I think that, if I'm getting really honest here, people from Western cultures are taught to center ourselves deeply. And that can be consciously or subconsciously. But especially when it comes to language and race and culture, we start equating those things, or a certain side of those things, a certain language, a certain race, a certain culture, we start equating that with intelligence, especially language fluency or fluency in English specifically. We start equating that with depth and value. But the thing is that fluency is a privilege. It's not a character trait. And reducing someone to their English vocabulary, that's just colonialism in a cuter outfit. So when we're talking about main character energy, it's so important to remember that it's only empowering when it leaves room for other people's humanity, because otherwise it just becomes entitlement. The belief that your experience matters more than somebody else's, just because you're the one holding the camera, you're the one speaking fluently in a certain language, you come from a certain country, you're of a certain race. That inherent feeling that I belong, I'm the center, everyone revolves around me, people are here for my pleasure, I'm here to bestow my dollars upon them, they're just street vendors, I can just wave them off, you know? That whole mindset, it's just so heartbreaking to me, it's so frustrating to see. And it's not just tourists in places like Asia or India or Africa, that's not only where it happens. It can happen in your everyday life too. You can just go to the coffee shop and you could treat the barista like they're just someone who's there to serve you coffee. You can get annoyed at a waitress for getting your order wrong without actually having the capacity to imagine that maybe she had a really bad day and she's being forgetful, but she's still here at work. I think it's about empathy. It's about realizing that everyone around you is living their own lives. They have their own stories. You are not the only one on a journey. And just because somebody is working a job where they're maybe serving you something, or they can't tell you their whole story in your language, it doesn't mean they don't have one. It doesn't mean that they don't have a life outside of this job or outside of selling you something on the street. Other people are not extras. They're not here to be character development devices in your story arc. People are stories unto themselves. Let's zoom out for a second and let's get back into philosophy. So there's this thinker that I've been obsessed with for a while now, and he's called Martin Buber, an Austrian Jewish philosopher, theologian, and writer. He lived around the late 1800s into the mid-20th century. And he was also part of existentialist philosophy, but with a deeply relational twist. So while most existentialists were focused on the self, on identity, freedom, the individual, Buber was asking, what does it mean to truly be with someone? To exist with other human beings? His most famous work is a book called I and Thou, written in 1923. And it's all about how we relate to each other and to the world. Okay, so stay with me here because this is so relevant to main character energy. Buber believed that there are two primary ways of relating to other human beings. I-it and I-thou. Okay, what does that mean? In an I-it relationship, we experience the other person as a thing. So, I, me, and it, thing. So we basically see this other person in a functional way. We see them in terms of what they can do for us, what role they play, how they fit into our day, our mood, or our timeline. So think of it like this. If you see a friend as that one who always listens to me vent, or you see someone that you're flirting with as a fun distraction from your own loneliness, Or the barista is just the person who gives me coffee, but you never actually learn their name. By the way, which is why I love what Tian said in the beginning, my friend, about asking the baristas for their names and how that makes him feel more at home, and it gives them humanity, and it just fleshes out their whole story while also making you feel like the main character. I just love that. Anyway, back to Martin Buber. So, in an I-it relationship, we're not seeing the full person. We're seeing them as a use, a function, or a character that somehow supports our plot. And this is what can happen when we live too deeply, I think, in main character energy. When we start to believe that everyone else is just passing through our movie. But Buber says there's another way to be with other people, and that's called I-thou. And in an I-thou relationship, we meet someone as a whole being. Not a role, not a task, not a reflection of us, but as someone with their own interior world, their own contradictions, emotions, and past lives that we'll never know everything about, with their own dreams that we don't have to understand to respect. So when you're in an I-thou relationship, that means you're present, you have a reverence for that other person's humanity, and you're looking at someone and you're saying, you are not here for me. You are just here, full stop. And that is enough. Okay, so when we're walking through life, thinking like a protagonist, and only like a protagonist, it becomes so easy to slip into I-it mode. Because we start asking, what can this person add to my story? Do they match my energy? Are they helping me become what I want to be? And then suddenly, we're not really connecting with people anymore. We're kind of reducing them to a utility or an aesthetic. So we're casting them as extras in our narrative. We're curating. But the real connection lives in the I-thou relationship. Because it's not about who fits the scene. It's about who shows up fully and who we choose to meet there with presence and attention. This makes me think of something that the philosopher Simone Weil said. She said, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Not love, not validation, but attention. The act of really seeing someone without needing them to be useful. Let me say that again. Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. And I think that's where main character energy can really go wrong. When we forget to give attention because we're so busy trying to get attention, we romanticize our lives, not for ourselves, but for perception. We're doing things for the camera or for the caption, for this imagined audience. And I get it. You catch yourself adjusting your posture in a cafe. You reach for your phone before you reach for your fork because you want to take a picture of this little solo date that you're on. You're posting that crying selfie, not for the process, but to kind of perform a certain level of vulnerability. And definitely I'm not saying that all of that is just performance. I think there's value in all of that too, but I guess it's just getting to a place of questioning the why. Like, why are we doing certain things? Where does this impulse come from? And does it come from a genuine place? Because this raises a deeper question, a postmodern one, in fact. If we live like we're always being watched, do we become more real or less real? We talk about main character energy like it's confidence. But when it's not rooted in authenticity, it's just costume. It's theater. And that's when it stops becoming empowering and it's just exhausting. Because performance needs validation, but presence just is. So I want this to be a gentle little gut check. Are you choosing this moment because it feels good or because it looks good? Are you dating this person because you're excited about who they are or because they make your story seem more interesting? Are you listening? Like truly listening? Or are you just waiting for your turn to speak? Because honestly, it's not main character energy if you're using other people as props. And you're not the only story unfolding. None of us are. We're a poem inside a novel, inside a library, inside a bigger library. So let's learn to live like that. With awareness, with curiosity, but also with room for other people's plot lines too. Because in the end, honestly for me, the only things that matter are empathy, curiosity, and creativity. Okay, so where do we land now? Because in the beginning I said, oh, main character energy is amazing. And now I kind of showed you the dark side and we talked through that. So where are we at the moment? I think this is where I want to leave you. Yes, be the main character. Romanticize your life. Feel your feelings deeply. Take yourself on dramatic little solo adventures. Play the soundtrack in your ears and strut like your decisions matter. Because they do. But also, remember, so does everyone else's. Every person you pass on the street, every cashier, every tuk-tuk Uber driver, every girl crying in a bathroom stall, every old man sitting quietly at the back of the bus, they're all living stories too. They have their own grief, joy, betrayals, secret talents and heartbreaks and dreams. And memories, everyone has their own memories that still bring tears to their eyes when they're alone. That's the balance. Be the main character, but let others be theirs too. Stay grounded in awe and awareness. And there's a little practice for that. You can ask yourself when you're meeting somebody, what role am I playing in their story right now? Am I the kind stranger? Am I the loud tourist? The judgmental onlooker? The unexpected connection? Because in someone else's life, you're not the protagonist. We need to realize that. You're the side role. You're that brief conversation they had that one time. You're the lesson. Or sometimes, you're the stranger that they remember for the next 10 years. And that's a gift. It's a gift to be a side character in somebody else's life. It's a gift and an art to live boldly without flattening the people around you. Please remember that you don't have to perform to be powerful. You can just be. You can be yourself fully, fiercely, attentively. So try this. Another practice. When you're meeting somebody new, automatically assume depth. Not surface, not summary, depth, because that is what they have. They have fully fleshed out, layered lives. Another thing, in public spaces, observe without centering yourself. Notice kind of like the textures of life around you. Ask nothing of this, just notice. And when you travel, do it with humility. You are not here to consume culture. You're not here to impose your culture or your beliefs of how things are supposed to be onto other people. You are a guest in somebody's hometown. And here's another thing. When you create, don't do it for an algorithm. Create like no one's watching. Don't write for somebody, write for yourself. Share what's real, not just what's polished. And also, not just this version of performative vulnerability. Because the world doesn't need more performance, it needs more presence. More people who can hold their own story with both hands while still making space for everybody else's. Whew, okay, wow. That was a lot. There's one more twist though. Main character energy, yes, beautiful, expansive, alive. We've talked about that. But being the main character isn't the end goal. Because yes, the main character lives the story. But who shapes the story? The author. The main character makes the bold moves, but the author knows why it's going to matter 3 chapters from now. Yes, the main character does it for the plot, but the author zooms out and writes with intention. And while the main character might still care who's watching, the author? No, they're just writing regardless. Simone de Beauvoir put it this way. She said, you must invent yourself, not be invented by the world around you. You're not a preset character. You're a living draft. A living draft. And the pen is in your hand. And Nietzsche, that favorite dramatic goth philosopher that we've talked about, he said that you are the sculptor and the marble. You're the raw material, and you're the one shaping it. So yes, make it a moment. Cue the playlist. Romanticize the coffee, right? But remember, the main character says, make it cinematic. The author says, make it mean something. Main character energy gets you on the stage. Author energy says, what are we performing and why? So if you've been waiting for a sign, let this be it. You are not just the one living this life, you're the one writing it. And the beautiful, terrifying, freeing part of that is that nobody else can do it for you. Wow. And by the way, speaking of author energy, thank you for helping my book, which came out like a month ago, hit the top 100 travel writing bestsellers on Amazon. That is honestly, wow. And as always, if this episode sparked something in you, if you found yourself smiling, questioning, tearing up, scribbling notes, please let me know, message me, tag the show, send it to a friend who really needs to hear it. And if you loved it, please leave a review, hit follow. It really helps the podcast reach the people who need to hear it most. Okay, that's it from me on this beautiful Thursday morning. I'm about to get myself some steaming hot po and Vietnamese coffee and go for my own little main character walk. And to you, don't forget to get a little lost. That's where the magic finds you. Until next time.